Hi guys, this week, you're going to be learning about comparison and contrast essays. So you probably compare and contrast things all the time. So comparison is looking at two things and deciding how they are similar. Contrast is looking at two things and deciding how they are different. So you probably compare things all the time. You might compare two options you have for lunch, okay? And then comparison and contrast doesn't always talk about how they're similar and how they're different, but you might also discuss how they're similar or how they're different and try to show that one is a better option than the other. In class, you might discuss with your teacher two things that you've read and how they're similar and how they're different. You might compare your teachers here or your class here to your teachers and your classes in your home country and notice some similarities and some things that are different. So that's what we're going to be doing. And again, the focus of your essay could be showing how these two things are similar, showing how they're different, but you may take it further and also discuss and try to show that one is better than the other. You might try to explain something that's unfamiliar by comparing it to something similar. You might be trying to prove that two things that seem very similar are actually quite different. Or you might be trying to prove that two things that seem really different are actually quite similar. So there could be some persuasion in a compare-contrast essay. You can also decide to focus on both. So I'm going to show you next how you can organize a compare-contrast essay. And you may look at two topics and think, I have both similarities and differences. So you can also do that too and discuss them both. The first way to organize a compare-contrast essay is the point-by-point method. So in this method, you'll introduce your two topics in the introduction because you're comparing or contrasting. So you'll have two topics. So let's say, for example, you choose to compare two modes of transportation. So cars and bicycles. You'll introduce cars and bicycles as modes of transportation in the introduction. Give your thesis statement. Either these two are similar or these two are different. And then maybe you're adding something else, trying to show that one is better than the other. And then each body paragraph discusses one point of comparison or contrast between the two topics. So, as you can see in this example, body paragraph 2 talks about convenience of use. And then it discusses convenience of use about cars, and then convenience of use about bicycles. And then the second body paragraph, if I can see this, talks about safety. So you'll write about car safety and then bicycle safety. Try to keep the same order in each body paragraph. If you talk about cars first in body paragraph 1 and then bicycles second, talk about cars first in body paragraph 2 and then bicycles second. And then the third body paragraph talks about cost. So you'll talk about the cost of owning a car and then compare it to the cost of owning a bicycle. So each body paragraph sets up one point of comparison or contrast between both topics. And then that's very easy for the reader to follow because they see them compared side by side. The second way to organize a compare-contrast essay is the block method. So this way, again, you have your two topics. So let's say we're comparing or contrasting two modes of transportation again, cars and bicycles. In this essay, instead of having 3 body paragraphs, you'll have 2, but there'll be 2 longer paragraphs. So the first body paragraph, you'll write everything about cars, their convenience and ease of use, their safety, their cost. Everything is about cars. And then the second body paragraph, you'll write everything about bicycles, again in the same order as the first body paragraph. The convenience and ease of use of bicycles, the safety of bicycles, the cost of bicycles. So you discuss everything about one topic in the first body paragraph, everything about the second topic in the second body paragraph. Now, another way you can use the block method is I said your main idea can discuss the similarities between 2 topics or the differences between 2 topics, or you may have both. You may have an equal amount of similarities and differences. So then do this. Have 2 long body paragraphs. In the first body paragraph, you discuss the similarities between the 2 topics. In the second body paragraph, you discuss the differences between the 2 topics. So that's another way to organize a compare-contrast essay also. So when choosing a topic for a compare-contrast essay, you want to think about, okay, you think about 2 things and then ask yourself, what features or characteristics do these 2 things have in common? What features and characteristics do they not have in common? What differences do they have? Can I come up with a main idea? Can I brainstorm the similarities and differences between these 2 topics and come up with a thesis statement, a main idea? Can I say these 2 things are similar or these 2 things are different? Can I argue that one of these is better than the other? Can I argue that they actually are distinct? Can I argue that they actually are similar? Can I come up with a good thesis statement, a good main idea for this essay? Can I find enough information to have good supporting sentences and good supporting details in my essay? So let's think about what are some topics. You could compare 2 countries. You'd have a lot to say to compare your country to the United States. You can compare something specific in 2 countries, maybe the education system, the teaching methods, the way classes are managed between 2 countries. You could compare or contrast 2 people you know, or 2 famous people, 2 famous athletes. You could compare a book you've read to the movie based on the book. You can compare yourself as a parent to the way your parents raised you. One of my favorite essay topics for this one is your expectations of living in the United States before you moved here compared to the reality. Yeah, it's quite different, isn't it? You can compare 2 events that happen in history, maybe 2 events that happen in history in your country, 2 different types of diets, 2 different sports, 2 different hobbies, 2 different pets, 2 different types of pets. Cats and dogs, how are they similar? How are they different? Let me look at some from the book here, well, from a different book. Rio de Janeiro versus Tokyo as a site for the Summer Olympic Games. Societies with small families and societies with large families. You could discuss family roles in your country to family roles in the United States, if you know enough about that. The career choice of becoming a teacher or a lawyer. Or you could compare 2 different jobs, 2 different career choices, 2 different majors in school, everyday life in the United States compared to everyday life in your home country, your neighborhood in the United States compared to neighborhoods in your home country. So there are a lot of things that we could write a compare-contrast essay about. Finally, this is called a Venn diagram. So once you've chosen your topic for a compare-contrast essay, this is a good way to brainstorm, to get ideas before you start outlining and writing your essay. So write both topics in the outside circles where you see subject 1, subject 2. And then you just think for about 5 minutes about your two topics. Anything that's different between the two, write in the outside circles. Any similarities, so any way that they match each other, you write in the middle. And then you can look at it and see, okay, do I have more similarities or do I have more differences? Or do I have both? What can be the 3 topics for my body paragraphs or 2 topics for my body paragraphs? Do I have enough information here where I can come up with a good main idea for my essay, a thesis statement for my essay? And then after you do this brainstorm, that's when you can start organizing your ideas. All right, so I'm going to have you in this module then look at some example thesis statements for compare-contrast essays, as well as read a couple compare-contrast essays to get some examples.